I called her up recently to talk about her now famous class exercise and what it says about America today. We talked about the first time she used it in a classroom. She won't ever forget the date, April 5th, 1968.
It wasn't a long time ago in my mind. It happened yesterday.
The day after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. She wanted her classroom of students, all of whom were white, to understand what discrimination felt like.
So I said, okay, today we're going to judge people by the color of their eyes. And because I have blue eyes and blue-eyed people are the greatest number in this room, brown-eyed people are going to be on the top the first day. Immediately somebody said, what do you mean? I said, I mean blue-eyed people aren't as smart as brown-eyed people. They aren't as civilized as brown-eyed people.
The students started to internalize what she was saying and then accepting the characteristics that were assigned to them based on the color of their eyes. A documentary film crew from the BBC captured the experiment on tape in 1970.
Who goes first to lunch? The blue-eyed people. No brown-eyed people go back for seconds. Blue-eyed people may go back for seconds. Brown-eyed people do not.
Brown-eyed.
Don't you know?
Oh, they're not smart.
Is that the only reason? It might take too much.
The very first time Jane Elliott used this, she watched and was horrified at what she saw.
I didn't know I was a racist until I watched my students become me.
Through the exercise, Elliott started to see her own privilege, even her own ignorance. At the lunch break, she went to the teacher's lounge. She was telling them all about the exercise. One of those teachers ended up displaying the same bigotry Elliott had spent the morning trying to fight.
She said, on the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, I don't know why you're doing that. I thought it was about time somebody shot that son of a... Not one of them reprimanded her for that or even corrected her. They all either smiled or laughed and nodded.
The interaction just strengthened Elliott's resolve.
At that point, I decided I had thought I would stop the exercise at noon. I decided I wasn't going to stop the exercise at noon. No person of any age is ever going to be my oppressors with those attitudes unchallenged.
Jane Elliott is now 87 years old. 50 years after she first tried that simulation in her classroom, Elliott sees much more work left to do.
People of other color groups seem to understand, probably because they have been taught by how they're treated in this country, that they have to understand us. We, on the other hand, don't have to understand them. We have to let people find out how it feels to be on the receiving end of that which we dish out so readily.
She says the last few years have brought out America's worst racist tendencies, but the protests happening now have given her hope.
Things are changing, and they're going to change rapidly if we're very, very fortunate. If this ugly change, if this negative change can happen this quickly, why can't positive change happen that quickly? I think it can.
It's Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Rachel Martin.
And I'm David Green. I'm Brick Briscoe. I make the Song Show. You know that show about songs and sometimes the people behind them, or maybe the stories that surround them, or maybe what those songs have in common with other songs. Well, I'm still having the time of my life doing that show. And I'd really love it if you tuned in. So join me on Saturdays at 7 p.m. and Sundays at 9 a.m. to be part of a musical conversation. And of course, you're going to hear some songs. It's the Song Show on WNIN 88.3.
10 minutes before 6 now at WNIN FM. You have found Morning Edition on your local public radio station. More of the program straight ahead. Starting next hour, we'll also have local and regional news, along with weather and traffic, right here on 88.3 WNIN FM.
unemployment around the world.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Fidelity Wealth Management, where advisors work with their clients to develop flexible investment strategies that evolve as their needs change. Fidelity.com/wealth. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC.
From Marketplace in New York, I'm Sabri Benishore in for David Brancaccio. The unemployment rate in the U.S. is currently at a hair over 11%. But what about globally? The fates of the U.S. and world economies are linked, and we have a picture of what things look like overall in a new report. Marketplace's Nova Safo has the details.
The report from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which serves 36 countries, finds that the pandemic is causing joblessness in the world's biggest economies to rise 10 times faster than during the Great Recession. In fact, the OECD predicts that by the end of the year, unemployment rates will be at their highest levels since the Great Depression. The group is warning governments to maintain emergency aid measures that support job retention. The world body sounded a similar alarm last month, but now says employment won't recover to pre-pandemic levels until 2022 at the earliest. That's a year later than previously forecast. A second wave of shutdowns could make the job picture even worse, and the OECD says women, young people, contract workers, and low-income workers are hardest hit. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
Now, as bad as the pandemic job losses have been, 31 million Americans on unemployment rolls, it could actually have been worse. Some companies have managed to cut their labor costs to save money without resorting to permanent layoffs, at least so far. Marketplace's Mitchell Hartman has more on how they did it.
In a recent survey of HR managers, outplacement firm Challenger Gray & Christmas found that 1 in 3 companies cut employee pay in response to the pandemic. And
of that group, 55% reported that cuts allowed them to avoid layoffs.
Senior VP Andy Challenger says the thinking is,
we'll have our team intact. It won't hurt morale so bad by letting people go.
Even when companies do reduce payroll, some are trying to retain ties to their workers. Among S&P 500 companies that have cut staff, 3/4 have done it through temporary furloughs rather than permanent layoffs, says Ganesh Rajapan at analytics firm MyLogic.
I believe it was done to retain talent.
He says among companies that did furloughs or hiring freezes, about 1/4 also reduced pay for top executives, though some of those cuts have since been restored. I'm Mitchell Hartman for Marketplace.
Let's take a look at the numbers. The FTSE in London is down 0.1%. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures are down in the 1 to 0.2% range, with the Dow future down 34 points.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by T. Rowe Price, offering a strategic investing approach with a long-term perspective aimed at helping investors feel confident through a variety of market conditions. Since 1937, T. Rowe Price, invest with confidence. And by Kronos, providing HR solutions for the modern workforce and the people who support, motivate, and engage them. Learn more about Kronos HR, payroll, talent, and time at kronos.com.
Rehab programs for drug and alcohol addiction, in some cases, put clients to work as part of their rehabilitation. An investigation by Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting shows these workers often don't get paid and are sometimes put in dangerous situations. The authors argue these arrangements are illegal. Laura Starcheski, a senior editor for Reveal who reported on the story, says her team identified at least 300 rehab facilities in 44 states that require unpaid labor from participants. She estimates at least 60,000 people per year have gone through these programs in recent years. She joins us. Good morning, Laura.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Can you start by just describing the arrangements at these rehab centers?
Sure. Well, typically people walk through the doors of these facilities expecting addiction treatment, and instead they are sent to work for no pay or for pennies on the dollar, either at businesses that the rehab owns or at private companies and sometimes large corporations like Shell, Walmart, Tyson Foods, Williams-Sonoma. What tends to happen is that people give months and years of their life to programs like this, but they don't get the actual treatment that they need. And they're left with psychological scars or physical scars, and then they have to, in the good cases, find their own way into recovery.
The conditions. at these jobs. Can you describe them?
I mean, we found rehab participants picking cotton and pecans at a farm in Georgia and building luxury high-rises, doing construction in the San Francisco Bay Area. We heard many examples of rehab participants being sent out to do work that they were not adequately trained for, dangerous work like climbing oil rigging in Louisiana or doing electrical work without adequate training. And we heard about injuries and even deaths on these job sites.
Are these programs voluntary? I mean, if someone feels like they're being taken advantage of, could they just walk away?
About a third of the programs that we looked at accept people who are court ordered. So that would mean they're ordered to complete a rehab program like this in lieu of jail or prison time. So in my mind, that's not exactly a voluntary situation.
So the argument for these programs is that these folks participating would not be employable otherwise. They're offered room and board for free, maybe offered counseling. I mean, does that count as payment?
It doesn't. The Fair Labor Standards Act is pretty clear on this, that even if someone is getting some kind of treatment and room and board in exchange for their work, they still need to be paid a minimum wage.
If that is the case, how are they still doing this?
Well, we found that the majority of programs are not licensed or regulated. State regulation of rehab facilities in general across the U.S. is inadequate. And federally, we've just found a handful of cases where the Department of Labor found violations in rehabs over the past couple decades.
Laura Starcheski is a senior radio editor for Reveal. This reporting is from American Rehab, a new podcast serial from Reveal and the Center for Investigative Reporting in partnership with PRX. Thank you so much for speaking with us.
Thanks so much for your time.
I'm Sabri Ben-Achour with the Marketplace Morning Report.